Many folks are doing their autopsies examining why did Vice President Kamala Harris lose to Donald Trump the 2024 presidential election. There are a variety of reasons. The Democrats stay at home. They weren't interested in voting for her over the issue with Gaza. It was the price of eggs and groceries. But investigative journalist Greg Plast, he says, no, voter suppression is the reason. And the fact of the matter is she could have easily won if it wasn't for that. He joins us right now. Greg, welcome back to the show. So walk us.
I'll be with you, Roland.
Walk us through what your research has determined.
Okay, it's real simple. In fact, if you go to gregpalast.com, you can get all the numbers so you don't have to keep your calculator and a pen next to you while I tell you what's going on. For those who, by the way, don't know me, Greg Plast, I'm an investigative reporter. I'm especially I'm known as a data journalist. I got the Global Editors Award for that. That means I'm a detective with a pen, and I used to work for the U.S. Justice Department and Attorneys General. My degree is in forensic economics. Why am I telling you all these things? Because I'm going to give you a lot of numbers, and you better believe them instead of the junk you're hearing from mainstream press. Here's what happened to Kamala Harris. Here's what happened to our democracy. What happened was that vote suppression won this election. Trump would have lost except for massive vote suppression. And what I mean by vote suppression, that's a very polite term for shafting black people out of their votes and other people of color, including a lot of young people whose votes are blue. Now, here's the calculation, and I'm very good at this stuff. I've been doing it for the NAACP, ACLU, Black Voters Matter, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson for years, this type of technical analysis which I take into courtrooms. Here's the number. If it wasn't for vote suppression, Kamala Harris would have had 3,565,000 more votes. 3,565,000 more votes, which would have given her a plurality of 1.2 million in the popular vote over Trump. Even more important, if not for Jim Crow trickery, which reached it's not new to this election, but it reached new heights in this election, Roland. Kamala Harris would have easily won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia for a total of 286 electoral votes, and she would be president of the United States right now. And here's how it breaks down, Roland. And this number is from the United States Elections Assistance Commission, an agency you've probably never heard of, but their job is to keep track of the votes in America. They track it, but they also do something else. They keep track of the non-votes in America. We are a nation that America's nasty little secret, Roland, is that we don't let everyone vote, in particular voters of color. In 23, leading up to the 24 election, states purged 4,776,706 voters from the voter rolls. 4.8 million, almost 5 million voters were simply erased off the voter rolls. I looked at elections in Venezuela, Liberia, Mexico, Switzerland, China, you name it. They don't purge people off voter rolls the way we do, this purge business. Now, who's getting purged of those 5 million voters? Well, I took a deep dive into the purge of, a couple of years ago, 300,000 voters in Georgia. I did this for the ACLU and Black Voters Matter, NAACP, and I uncovered that 198,000 voters in Georgia who were removed because supposedly they moved from their Georgia voting address. Not one of them moved. Now, I'm not guessing. I hired the experts who work with Amazon who know exactly where you live. There's a lot of Roland Martins in America, but you don't get someone else's tidy-whities, do you? Because Amazon knows exactly where you live, and I got a special contract with the U.S. Postal Service to hunt down people. We're not guessing. We went name by name by name, 198,000 voters who they said had moved out of Georgia, and there they were at their homes. Now, who were they? We called 800 of them, which is a very big statistical sample. Almost all of them were African-American voters in Georgia. That's who gets purged. In Wisconsin, and if it weren't for those purges, Kamala Harris would have taken Georgia and other challenges to black voters. In Wisconsin, Roland, there was a purge of over 150,000 voters. Again, I went name by name by name through that list for Black Voters Matter. Literally with computers, we went through every single name. Tens of thousands of people accused of voting from an illegal address, and they were purged from the voter rolls before this election. Now, I actually mapped this with the Washington Post, and we found out that almost every single wrongly removed, purged voter not allowed to vote was an African American in Milwaukee. That was most of the list. And then some of the list were students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, well-known left-wing school. Those are not Trump voters. So it's young voters and Black voters. There was a complete match between the number of voters who were purged wrongly and Black precincts in Milwaukee. That's just the beginning. That's the purges. 2.1 mail-in ballots, Roland. Let me repeat this. 2.1 million mail-in ballots were rejected. People don't realize, according to NPR, 13.8%, that's about 1 in 7 mail-in ballots is thrown in the garbage. Let me repeat that. You mail in your ballot, it's very easy for them to knock off your ballot. And they know who you are. They know your zip code. And in places like Georgia, they know your race because it says BLA next to your name if you're Black in many states in the South. That's still on the voter rolls. Now, if it was random, if anyone's mail-in ballot was thrown out, Roland, so big deal. But the state of Washington did an analysis of whose mail-in ballot gets rejected. And they found that if you are Black, you are 400% more likely than if you are white to have your mail-in ballot rejected. You didn't put a middle initial, you registered with your middle initial, but you didn't include your middle initial on the outside of the envelope. Postage due, tricks like that. And it's all aimed at challenging Black votes. Spoiled ballots, 585,000 ballots, which people voted in their precincts. They voted in their precincts, and those ballots are rejected as supposedly unreadable. All these gotcha things. Now, again, whose ballot gets rejected? Are you ready for this? The U.S. Civil Rights Commission did an analysis and found out that your chance of having your ballot rejected for some technical reason, whether it's mailed in or in precinct, is 900% higher if you're Black than if you're white. Repeat that. I just told you about altogether about 3 million ballots rejected. 900% higher chance you will have your ballot rejected if you're Black than if you're white. Provisional ballots. Roland, let me tell you something. There's this thing called provisional ballots. You go in, oh, your name's on the voter rolls. Don't worry, fill out this piece of paper, stick it in an envelope, this provisional ballot. I call them placebo ballots because they'll tell you, the nice little lady behind it is going to say, hey, your ballot will be counted. Just fill out this form. Oh, yeah? Well, in states like Georgia, if you don't go into your county voting office, your clerk's office, and what they call cure your ballot, you have to show them your ID, you have to prove you're an American citizen. They're going to throw your ballot in the garbage, according, again, to the U.S. government, the United States Elections Assistance Commission. This isn't just Greg Plast saying it, Roland. The U.S. government says that 43% of all provisional ballots are thrown in the garbage. Whose ballots are they? If you're Black, Hispanic, or Asian American, the chance you will be shunted to one of these placebo BS back of the bus provisional ballots is 300% higher if you're a voter of color than if you're white. So whose provisional ballots are in that dumpster? Voters of color. And how does this happen? The Brennan Center, if you go to gregpalast.com and actually see these, you can see this map that I got from the Brennan Center. 30 states passed laws making it more difficult for people of color to vote in the 2024 election. It was Trump's victory map. Altogether about, because not everyone purged would have voted for Harris, not everyone purged would have voted, but still you've got about 2.3%, 3,565,000 voters who would have voted for Harris were denied their ballot or denied the right to vote in the first place. And that's just the beginning of the ugliness.
Greg, you called it Jim Crow trickery. What people have to understand that this idea of in terms of how they changed these laws. First of all, the purge was a white man in Ohio who sued and went to the Supreme Court because Ohio purged, saying that, well, he had not voted in 2 or 3 elections. And he sued and he lost. Supreme Court cleared the way for purging. But then what we've seen the legal purging where, we didn't realize X number of people were on the list. It happened in Virginia. It's happened in Florida. It's happened. And there's no coincidence that it keeps happening to African Americans. And it's all about creating massive hurdles. As you said, you got to sign the outside and the inside. It's like all these different rules, and it happens in Pennsylvania and other places, and it's all designed to be able to confuse people. And if you don't follow every single step, then you're in violation.
And you don't even know whether you followed the steps. For example, you fill out a provisional ballot, and no one says, it says, put in, like, for example, in Ohio, it says put in an ID number. Well, if you say, or driver's license number, and if you say no driver's license, they'll disqualify your ballot. They will disqualify your ballot. I didn't know that voting had to do with whether you had a driver's license or not. I thought it had to do with whether you're an American citizen. And by the way, when the Supreme Court said, if you haven't voted a couple elections, they can remove you, supposedly on grounds you've moved away, that's why you haven't voted. Well, it says right in the 1993 Voter Registration Act, the National Voter Registration Act, it says right there, you cannot be removed because you've chosen not to skip a couple elections for whatever reasons. By the way, I've skipped a couple elections because I'm a journalist and I've had to go out on election day when I didn't expect to, but basically out of the white areas, I didn't get purged and I'm not going to get purged. What happens is that you get purged if you're in Columbus, if you're in Dayton, if you're in Atlanta. And again, 4.776 million voters purged. And when I went through that list, overwhelmingly black and overwhelmingly wrong. Overwhelmingly wrong. And let me, by the way, if you want to see what happens, I'm giving you numbers because I'm a statistician, but I want to tell you about human beings, Roland. If you watch my film Vigilantes Inc., which, by the way, Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio have made this film available to stream for free. If you go to gregpalast.com, and you will see me in an Atlanta voting station, where, and I'll tell you about the man you're seeing right there, Major General Gamaliel Turner. Now, Gamaliel Turner, this man who was 70 years old, the Pentagon's expert on warfare of the future, and if you can see on your screen, he is definitely African American. He was assigned by the President of the United States to go from Fort Benning, Georgia, to a base in California, and he didn't get his vote. His mail-in ballot didn't come, and he calls up Georgia. He says, "What happened?" They said, "Well, Major Turner, you've been challenged." He says, "What does that mean?" He says, "Someone challenged your vote, and so you can't get your ballot." He says, "Well, what do I do?" He says, "Well, just come on in and show you're a citizen and that you live in Georgia." And he says, "Wait, I'm a soldier. I'm 2,700 miles away, and 2 days before the election, you want me to come just come in?" Now, you have to understand, one person challenged 4,000 people out of the Fort Benning area, almost all of them African-American soldiers. This was not a government official. This was a Republican Party official, the chairman of the Republican Party in southern Georgia. His name's Alton Russell. He even dresses like a vigilante. You'll see him in the film with a 6-gun. He thinks he's Doc Holliday. This guy challenged 4,000 voters. Now, I got to tell you, Major Turner actually flew to Georgia. He flew 5,000 miles to go to federal court to get his ballot, one ballot counted. 4,000 others, again, mostly black soldiers out of Fort Benning, did not get their ballots. And you saw on the screen, you had one woman that I confront in the film. She works for Marjorie Taylor Greene. a white Republican. And I'm telling you, there are 88 challengers 2 years ago in Georgia, or 4 years ago, and all of them are white Republicans. They're not government officials. I'm not being racist about it. That's what they were. One single woman challenged 32,000 voters. And I showed her the pictures of her black neighbors. I said, do you know who these people are? No. You don't know who these people are, but you challenge their right to vote. So they were challenging soldiers. They're challenging students. They're challenging just all their black neighbors by the thousands. And in fact, are you ready for this? By August, 3 months before the election, the Trump front group, True the Vote, proudly announced that it had already challenged 317,886 voters. That's a third of a million voters in swing states, Roland. A third of a million voters, overwhelmingly voters of color. And this is something that hasn't been done since 1946. This is the Ku Klux Klan plan of 1946, these mass challenges of black voters. This is brand new to 2024.
This is one of the reasons why, like in North Carolina, they want to strip the governor of being able to control the state elections board. This is why they're doing this. So the question is, and I got about 90 seconds before I go to the panel for them to ask questions. What is now happening in advance? Because now, of course, they control the Department of Justice. You're not going to see any voting rights investigations. You're not going to see any of this. They're in charge of the levers of power. So what now? What happens next? How must people prepare themselves for what we are about to see? Because now they're going to have the power to do this on steroids.
Well, tomorrow I'm going to be having breakfast with the Reverend Jesse Jackson, or Wednesday, and planning what our line of attack will be to protect these votes. I'm working with Gerald Griggs, president of the NAACP of Georgia, Latasha Brown, Black Voters Matter. You notice I'm not working with the Democratic Party. One, because I'm a journalist and I'm a nonpartisan. But the Democratic Party is totally missing in action on vote suppression. They just aren't there. But the groups are organizing to stop this new Ku Klux Klan plan. You have to understand that in 1946, the Ku Klux Klan elected one of the Klan leaders, Eugene Talmadge, as governor of Georgia, by systematically challenging virtually every black voter in Georgia. Now, these Jim Crow laws are in the books of about 30 states, still allow, I can say, dig this, Roland, I can say, oh, Roland Martin doesn't live where he says he is. He shouldn't be allowed to vote. Now, who's Greg Plast to say that? Doesn't matter. As long as you live in my county, I can challenge your right to vote, and you're not going to get a ballot. Or worse, you'll mail in your ballot. You won't even know that your ballot wasn't counted.
Right. So here's the question. Let me do this here. I want to bring in my panel right now.
Okay.
I want them to get their questions in so we can so people can really understand, because the depth of this, and again, we talk about it a lot, that people don't fully grasp is how significant this is on many levels. At the Amakongo Dibinga Senior is professorial lecturer, School of International Service at American University, author of Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, she's an economist, author of Surviving and Thriving, 365 Facts in Black Economic History. She's also president emerita at Bennett College. Joining us from D.C., Joe Richardson. He is civil rights attorney out of Los Angeles. Joe, I'll start with you. Your question for Greg Plast.
Mr. Palast, appreciate you being here. Roland kind of took what I was going to ask next, but let me ask this. You've been doing what you've been doing for a long time. What's the next investigative frontier for you? Because I think one of the things that has to happen is that journalists that are actually looking for information that are not in the box, as it were, like the Roland Martins and the Greg Plast and things like that, are going to have to help to uncover a lot of these truths just through research. I love it that you're a statistician. What is it that you're going to be, I know you're going to do some things related to this issue, but is there any other issues out there that connect to some of these things, some of these justice issues that you're looking at next?
Well, I am very, very concerned about this and I want to dig deeper into this, in the challenge, this mass challenge of voters by self-appointed vigilantes. Again, this is the Ku Klux Klan plan of 1946 and this Trump front group called True the Vote. They're the ones, by the way, that came up with this, with the film 2,000 Mules, where they called 2,000 black men. Every one of them was a black man. 2,000 black men were supposedly stuffing ballot drop boxes with multiple ballots. They were being paid supposedly by George Soros and Mark Zuckerberg $10 each to commit a felony crime. I got to tell you, every person that they showed on camera as a black men stuffing ballot boxes, because every ballot box has a camera on top of it so they can see what voters. Every one of them was a legal voter, and they've been sued to fare thee well, but they don't care. They don't care. They were proudly knocked off 250,000 voters by August. Their aim was 2 million voters by Election Day. What I have to do is, I've been getting stonewalled by state officials who have not been giving me the numbers. How many people in the end were challenged? How many people actually did lose their vote? I need those numbers. It looks like the numbers are huge, but I want to get a more exact analysis from each state. But they're stonewalling us, and we're not going to get the numbers from the Elections Assistance Commission until maybe even for another year, if at all, because the states are resisting and they're not required by law to turn over the data. We're the only we're the only nation among so-called democracies where the vote count and the vote non-count is some type of state secret. We need to know how many ballots were rejected, how many voters like Major Turner lost their vote. When I was and so I want to find out, I need to get those numbers because this is a brand new thing, this vigilante vote challenges of, again, not government officials, but self-appointed vigilantes who are getting lists. We had this one woman in Cobb County, Georgia, works for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She submitted 32,000 names in Cobb County, 32,000 names, one GOP official. And, again, it's not just, and I want to tell you, it's very important. It's not just numbers. I was at the polling station when a 92-year-old woman in Atlanta was thrown out of the polling station where she'd voted for 50 years, 92 years old, in a walker, thrown out into a storm. Her granddaughter in hysterics. Well, I went to the house that she said she no longer lived in. It was just down the street from the polling station. And there was a picture of her having dinner with Martin Luther King from 50 years old earlier in that house. This was Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. So if they can knock off Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin, they can knock off anyone, and they are. This is what I really want to look at, is this explosion of vigilante vote challenges. And under Trump, if you think the Justice Department is going to stop it, think again. We have to stop it ourselves.
Julian Malvo, your question. Julian?
How are you, Greg? Last time I saw you, we were Reverend Jackson.
Yes.
I really appreciate your work always. You just do such great work.
Thank you.
So you looked at the presidential election and said Kamala would have won had it not been for this suppression. Were there states where we also lost congressional seats? I don't think we lost Senate seats. We didn't have any close Senate races, but congressional seats. Are there other races that you can lift up that might have made a difference in this environment?
Oh, absolutely. I was looking at close congressional races. I still haven't finished the numbers. One of the reasons it took me a couple months, it's a lot of numbers to crunch, and I don't want to just throw stuff out there. But it looks like the Democrats would have picked up at least 3 or 4 congressional seats, if not for these vote suppression tactics. Because, again, when you knock off Major Turner's vote, when you take away a soldier's vote, when you take away Martin Luther King's cousin's vote, that goes all the way down the ballot. And so I have been very concerned that basically the GOP should not have control of the House of Representatives at this moment, except for their successful wielding of vote suppression tactics. But I will be issuing a report on the congressional races soon.
Great.
But I will say that, but I will say this here, Greg, that the voter suppression that we saw, it does have an impact when you talk about the Senate race in Pennsylvania of Bob Kasich.
Yes, and I want to look at Pennsylvania because Cleta Mitchell, Donald Trump's lawyer, Cleta Mitchell, she challenged tens of thousands of voters in the Philadelphia area through an organization called Eagle AI, which is, by the way, a very interesting name because Eagle Eye was the name of a racist group back in 1964 that challenged a whole bunch of Hispanic voters in Arizona. They brought back this racist operation from 64. They brought back the Klan operation from 46. It's shameless. And it's getting very little coverage in the mainstream U.S. press. Now, people should understand, I write for The Guardian and BBC, which are the world's major outlets in the English language. But it doesn't come into my home country. So I'm all over, I'm mainstream in the rest of the world, just not in America.
Makongo, what's your question?
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Palast, for this work. I want to touch on, and you also mentioned Cleta Mitchell, who wanted to target youth votes. So I wanted to come back to your part on the youth vote. As a professor, I see so many kids who are disenfranchised and the like, but they don't have this level of information. They're not getting it on K-12 level. What is your charge? What is your opinion about what we should be doing with the young people as it relates to making sure they're aware of this as they're coming into the voting age and process?
You're doing it. Education, education, education. The first thing I tell people, and really important for students, check your registration 90 days before an election. See if you've been challenged, see if you've been purged. In most states, within 9 days of election, you can re-register. In fact, if you haven't voted in a couple elections, just re-register. Even if you think, I've been voting the same place for years. No. Check your registration. I had a student in Madison, Wisconsin that I put on camera, and you'll see him in my film Vigilantes Inc., a Vietnamese American kid. He had moved dorm rooms. He just moved, different part of the building. Well, under the law, you don't lose your vote if you move within your county. But they do this to students if they've moved at all. They send them a postcard to confirm their address. And if they don't get that postcard, because it looks like junk mail, most people throw it away. I call it the poison postcard system. If you don't see that postcard and return it, you lose your vote. One way to get around that is tell all your students, tell everyone, and tell them to tell their families. Check your registration 90 days before. The problem with the new challenge system, for example, Georgia changed its law so that these vigilantes can challenge your vote on election day. They don't have to notify you for 30 days. Well, the election's over after 30 days. So you get challenged. You may not. In fact, it was only by accident that Major Turner, this African-American officer, found out that his vote was challenged because he called. He said, "Where's my ballot?" They didn't notify him. They just said, "Well, you've been challenged." So we have to tell people to check their registrations, check and check again and again. A lot of states now, dozens of states, have same-day registration. So bring every form of photo ID you have and something to show your address, like an electric bill or something. So you start out by protecting your vote. The second thing you do is you get active. If you have students that aren't part of an organization on the front lines, forget partisan stuff. I'm not talking about joining Democratic or Republican parties. I'm talking about work with Black Voters Matter Fund, work with Reverend Jackson and Rainbow Push, work with the NAACP. There's great organizations out there, like less known to a lot of people is the Transformative Justice Coalition, headed by Barbara Arnwine. A great Hispanic organization on the ground, Southwest Voter Registration Education Project. If you don't get active, the other side is active. And by the way, they don't go to sleep in off years. Americans go, progressives go to sleep in off years, whereas the vote purgers and the Jim Crow operatives, they're 24/7, 365 days a year, every year. They don't rest. And so we can't either.
Greg Plast, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Before I let you go, I have been interviewing some of the candidates running for DNC chair. So if you had to ask Ben Wickler a question, what would it be?
So when are you going to take on Jim Crow and stop hiding? on this issue. I can tell you right now, Reverend Jackson asked both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to watch my film, to watch Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen, which you can, again, go to gregpalast.com, stream it for free. He said, watch it and do something about it. And Harris said, well, when I get elected, I'll sign the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He said, well, here's the problem, Kamala, as you just found out. If you don't do something before the election, you ain't going to get elected. So that's what we have to do, educate. And by the way, if you want to show your films in the class, in your classrooms, in your churches, go to gregpalast.com and we can hook it all up and you can get that film so people can see for themselves a real story. And it's a movie, it's entertaining. But again, for those running for DNC chair, hey, man, take on Jim Crow. We got to do it again.
All right, Greg Plast, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. And right now we're accepting investors in our $17 million round to revolutionize the future of social media. Today, for just $399, you can own 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. While the big platforms have grown too massive and disconnected from their users, Fanbase is building a platform where creators and users truly come first. We've already raised $4.8 million from everyday investors who believe in this vision, and now you can join them. This is your chance to invest in a social media tech company with over 1 million users that is disrupting media by allowing anyone to reach all of their following and monetize their content from day one. The market is changing, big platforms are failing to serve their users, and Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now. Invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the future of social media.